Good morning, this is Dr. Brandy Marks, Biblical Licensed Mental Health Counselor, and today we're looking at part 2 of Teens Not the Enemy. Okay, this part is going to address guilt and who's taking advantage of whom, manipulation and how to manage it, and discipline in the home. Teens may use guilt trips to get their way, especially if you train them early on to use guilt. Okay, yeah, most of the time they learn from us, the parents. They know your vulnerabilities, and so should you. So you aren't or can't be manipulated into doing something because you're feeling guilty for whatever. In the past, maybe something happened and you feel guilty, and so you want to make it up to them. But this is so inappropriate, and it doesn't teach your teens anything about responsible behavior. Be fair, firm, and flexible, but don't let them get the best of you. This is where confidence in yourself as a parent and your parenting can come in really handy. And having fair, firm, yet flexible rules is hugely helpful. But now in the past videos, we looked at how you can set these firm, fair, flexible rules. and so you can more enforce them now. Okay, let's move on. Okay, who's taking advantage of whom? We can all be a manipulator and may or may not even be aware of what we're doing. I was talking to my neighbor about it this morning and sharing with her what the slide I was going to be teaching on. Next week, we'll be looking at managing manipulation, the whole realm of it, whether adult or a child. And she says, well, have I ever been a manipulator? Well, usually when people ask that question, it's because they know they have. And I know I have. I gave her a very specific instance of when a certain behavior I used with my boyfriend worked quite well. So I started using it in other ways as well. It was a tool of manipulation, even though I didn't recognize it as such. I just knew it worked in the past, and so I was using it now. Eventually, he caught on and started confronting me on it. Methods of manipulation can include withholding privileges to get your way, rewards, bribes when things go your way, using ancient history to cause pain and hurt to influence their behavior. And manipulation is a form of persecution, however, that reduces free will or takes it away because you're using unfair advantages to get what you want. Be careful of being manipulated. How do you know? If a topic is being discussed repeatedly, no answer is being found, if you constantly have to negotiate and compromise and are always feeling on edge about something, if one person plays one against another, kids are very good at this, especially with parents that are having difficulties. They will play you off against each other. If one of you, mom or dad, does all the discipline, then your limits, chances are, being tested by your team, and they're using this to manipulate you. Be clear and consistent with rules and expectations and discipline, which we've already looked at in preceding slides. Okay, how to manage manipulation. Ask questions. State the facts about what's going on, which requires knowing how you're feeling in the moment and clear thinking. If a topic is being discussed repeatedly, ask them, now wait a minute, what have we already decided about this? Why do you keep bringing it up then? No, we've already discussed this. This is what we decided on, and stick with it. If you feel on edge, ask yourself, what's happening here? We agreed on a solution to this already. So why are you still persisting and pushing me to change my mind? I'm not going to, or whatever. If one person is playing you against another, or mom does all the discipline and dad does none, or vice versa, you can say, I'm seeing or doing, we agreed that, so how are you going to follow through? You can say to your spouse, I'm seeing myself doing all this discipline. This is really not fair to me. We agreed that I would do the discipline during the day, but when you were home in the evening, perhaps after work or whatever, that you would be doing it. So how are you going to follow through? Now, next week, we'll deal with the manipulation, managing stuff in more detail. So let's look at discipline in the home. How to discipline. It's not the same as punishment. It has a far different purpose. The Lord corrects those he loves and disciplines those he calls his own. This is the way it should be for parents. Be patient when you're being corrected. This is how God treats his own children. Don't all parents correct their children with discipline, not punishment. God corrects all his children, and if he doesn't correct you, then you don't really belong to him. Okay, he's given you over to Satan until you figure it out and get back on track with him. So, discipline not the same as punishment. What's the difference? Well, discipline teaches a child a lesson, and so they want to obey after that to avoid the consequences of that discipline of doing what was wrong. Punishment causes them pain and anger towards you. Discipline causes them to be upset about the consequences, which they may try to manipulate you with. But that's where you set your firm, fair, flexible boundaries, right? And you don't allow them to manipulate with it. Walk the talk. A mature person is a disciplined person. And God's purpose in discipline is to grow you into spiritual maturity and human maturity, emotional, mental health maturity, a balanced mind and emotions. Discipline places a person under authority, God's authority, the authority of the parents, employers, and others, teachers, and so forth. In other words, we learn to respect God through the discipline that he allows in our life. Children should learn to respect the discipline of their parents, not be afraid of the punishment. And we, of course, at work, respect the discipline of our employers, because we know if we don't, we'll lose our job or we won't get the next advancement, and so on. Discipline is a tool, not a weapon of anger. Discipline is a process of working in love and speaking the truth in love. Correction is best when it deprives the child of something they love. It doesn't deprive them of your love. Discipline, McDonald says, is the deliberate creation of stress in a relationship to help your child learn and grow. Discipline is a task, a strategy that strengthens them and helps them to be more spiritually, mentally, emotionally mature. Discipline makes them face hard questions and wrestle with the answers, not try to just get it right. Discipline is learned through trial and error by allowing them to make mistakes but learn from them. Punishment is all about handing out justice, which should be fair and equitable. If a rule is violated, the punishment given should fit the crime and the person. A 3-year-old would not respond to grounding. They really don't understand the concept. A teenager would be in agony if they were grounded. Children learn to assess the seriousness of their actions when the punishment is serious enough for the deed. Okay, when busy, we tend to overreact to teens, and they learn not to take us serious. So we set up our own barriers by doing this. To be thoughtful, caring people, teens need parents who are thoughtful and caring. Parents create barriers between themselves and their teens with careers and being busy with everything but their children. Well, yes, but this church meeting is important. So is your child. You put God and the family first, and you won't have so many problems with your teens. If work and your career constantly come before your children, there's a problem. Say no to career, activities, or even church if it comes between you and your children. Take a break from work. Take some of that vacation time to spend at home with your kids to correct an ongoing problem and to work with them, to be there for them. Stretch and grow. Discipline should stretch and grow our teens so they become strong, mature people. Now, punishment or consequences for inappropriate behavior. I probably should have used consequences instead of the word punishment, because punishment tends to be inflicted on a teen where they don't particularly learn. When they have consequences for behavior, as we learned earlier, they are stretched and they grow and become stronger, more mature people. When they ask what seems to be impractical, instead of reacting with no way, you can say, I need some time to think about this. Let me give you an answer in a couple of hours. And then be sure you do, of course. This way, they learn to take some time to think before taking any action themselves. They learn from your healthy example. So let's look at some examples on the next slide. Coping with stress. McDonald not only gives examples, but he actually takes his teenager out in a car or other teaching situation and has them go through the adventure, not just think about it. He has them actually do it. I thought it was an incredible idea. So consider events in your teen's life and take them on a test run. You can do this with younger children, like teaching them to make a bed and so forth as well. Okay. Consider various situations the teenager could encounter in life with a new experience and let them act out how they would respond. Some of the examples McDonald gives are, you're on a date and have a flat tire. Then have the teen go through the motions. You take them out in the car, they're driving along, and you say, uh-oh, you just have a flat tire. What are you going to do next? If they're on a freeway, they ideally will pull over to the side to a safe area and go through the motions of changing the tire, which of course isn't actually flat. If they're out in the country on a narrow road, that's a whole different ball of wax. So how are they going to handle it? Now your engine breaks down. Do you leave the date and go for help, or what are you going to do? You get them to think for themselves. Did they take their cell phone with them? If they have it, do they have the AAA number or their insurance, a roadside help number on their cell phone so they can call for help? Do they have your phone number and know where they can reach you when they're out on that date or wherever, some events, so they can call you to come and help if you don't have roadside assistance on your insurance? Freeway construction, find another way. Where are you going to go? See, these all challenge them to think for themselves and to overcome these difficult obstacles. There's freeway construction, you're going to be late getting home. We have a curfew for you. Yet you're not going to, it's going to be a couple hours before you can get back now. What are you going to do? Did they take their cell phone with them? Do they know how to contact you in this kind of emergency? Okay. Inevitably, discipline or consequences for wrongful behavior creates resentments. It ticks them off. They don't like it. You may feel uncomfortable, doubt yourself, and be tempted not to discipline, to give in and not make a big deal of it. Nevertheless, you have to strengthen yourself and fight the good fight, so to speak, so you will have strong, mature children as a result. And also, whenever a parent is offended, whichever parent is offended by the behavior, they should be the one to administer the punishment. If something doesn't bother you so much as driving your husband or your other spouse nuts, well, I don't see anything wrong with this, you might say. If this really bothers you, then what do you want to do about it? Hand it to them. I remember my boyfriend one time was upset with something my youngest son did, and he wanted me to go take some kind of punishment on the kid. And I said, no, I'm not going to do this. If you feel he needs to be punished, you need to do it. And he walked away because he wanted to do it, but it really wasn't that big a deal. But he wanted me to punish him instead. And I didn't. I chose not to take part. Okay, I've asked you to, and it's still not done. And you say this, you hear yourself saying this over and over again. The problem is not always evident. You may not have been clear enough to the teen. They didn't understand, or you didn't follow through in the past, so they don't take it too serious. What are you going to do? Be specific about the time frame needed to accomplish something, and say exactly what they need to do, what your expectations are. Now, we covered this a couple of times before in many videos in the past, so you might want to go back over some of those. Okay, consider, excuse me. Consider each child and their differences and how they respond, and let them know your expectations, and always follow through on consequences. Consistency is so important. What kind of parent are you? Are you flexible? Are you too flexible? Are you wishy-washy, in other words? Are you rigid or inflexible? Being consistent with your children is key, so they understand your expectations and the consequences for when they don't comply. But being wishy-washy and too fluidy is not the answer. And being totally rigid and inflexible with a changing situation and being a hard nose, that's why Jesus was so upset with the Pharisees, because of their hard heart and being so inflexible with religious rules. Encourage the child's suggestions, and they're taking the initiative, not waiting to be asked. You can say to them, when you have a problem with this, if you think you know how to fix it, go ahead with it. If you have any questions, just ask me, okay? But be consistent in your expectations. What do you do when they stomp off and slam the door to their room? When you set a standard for consequences for obedience, consequences for disobedience, then follow through, no matter how many doors they slam. I suggest you watch the slideshow on balance of power. I'm not sure if I've shown that yet, but I will. Next week, we're going to be doing managing manipulation. The week after that, then I'll do the balance of power, in case we haven't revisited that in the past. Oops, wait a minute. Disrespectful body language should receive consequences like any disobedience. Let them know they will be judged by their behavior and the words of their mouth. This is what the Bible says. Okay, fear of consequences. Proverbs says that fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Children should have reasonable fear of their parents, awe of them, not absolute terror of being beaten nearly half to death or something if they misbehave. Teach children responsibility and fear of the consequences when they are very young, and they will walk in the way of the Lord and not turn away to the right or the left. But inconsistency, expecting too much of them or the wrong things from them when they're younger or as they're growing up and you don't allow them any autonomy, that can lead to rebellion. Teach them that water drowns, fire burns, and hurting other people hurts them. So, what to do when a teenager disobeys? Who decides what? Ask what they recommend as punishment. That can be hugely insightful. You'd be surprised. Sometimes their idea is more severe than yours. I would like your input. What do you think will help you to remember not to do that again? Help me out here. Give me your suggestions. Once the consequences are decided on, set a time limit for enforcing them and then follow through. How long do you expect it will take you? Threatening and not following through only leads to disaster and disrespect or further manipulation. Okay, how to deal with disobedience. There are two types. Butt spanking, consequential. Spanking is for under the age of 13, not for teenagers. Consequential means the punishment fits the type of disobedience or the consequence. I still prefer the word consequence over disobedience. Some of this I got from a book where they like to use the word punishment. Okay, not come home on time. Say no the next time. No, you can't go out. Not until you prove that you are trustworthy. Nagging, sarcasm, and verbal put-downs are not an effective form of discipline. Consequences, verbal reprimands, timeouts, financial restitution, a behavior change plan that the teen describes and writes down. The child writes the plan. Maybe you restrict privileges, give them unpleasant work that's not part of their daily chores. Home confinement can be a consequence. Natural logical consequences. They're late going to bed, they're tired the next morning because they have to still get up at the regular time. This you insist on. Radio's not turned down. They lose their radio, although nobody uses a radio anymore. Wherever they get their radio, their music and games from, they lose use of that for 24 hours. So they're swearing and aggressive. You request first that they redirect themselves or they lose the privileges. Now, this last part here we used at Columbia River Mental Health when I was working with in an off-site facility with very, very dysfunctional teens. Some were sex offenders. And we had very strict consequences for inappropriate behavior. And these worked beautifully, bringing them into line. If you think they're too harsh, but that means maybe you're being a little bit too wishy-washy. But if they're swearing and aggressive, maybe you're swearing and aggressive and they're learning from you. So you need to redirect yourself and reframe your experience in life so your teens learn a better behavior. But in the meantime, you also ask them to redirect their behavior or lose certain privileges. Negative activity of any kind, they lose that activity for 24 hours. Throw the controller, they lose the game for 24 hours. I had one of my sister's grandchildren would just get so angry, and I says, you know, you do that one more time and I'm taking it away. And 2 seconds later, he was doing it again, because what he had heard many times in his life, stop doing that, don't do that. I've warned you not to do that. But nobody ever followed through with him. I picked it up, took the whole game away from him, and he didn't get it back for quite a while. I don't remember how long it was, maybe half an hour or so. He was a little kid, about 5 years old, so I probably only took it away for about 10 or 15 minutes. And he never did that again. He learned very quickly, with the second time he started acting out. I said, do you remember what happened last time? He immediately calmed down. He didn't want to lose his game. Okay, they don't do their chores that are assigned or that they chose. If you're doing this in a family, as we've seen before, you have a chore list where everyone has chosen their chores, the ones they're going to do. So what chores? Have they not done them? Then if they're not, haven't, they don't go outside or no friends over until their chores are done. You might take the cell phone away, the television away, whatever. There should be consequences for the situation that's disobedient. You can say to them, give them choices. It's their choice, so you don't feel guilty. Well, you can feel guilty all day long, but you still have to remind yourself it's their choice. You can turn down the television now or lose it for the next 24 hours. calm, cool, and collected, but extremely firm. You can stop watching that show now or lose the television for the next 24 hours. You can turn off the pornography and go to a different channel or lose the computer for the next 24 hours. It's your choice. You can do your chores or stay inside without your friends until the chores are done. You can go outside with your friends after the kitchen or other chores are done. If you throw the controller again, you will give up the game for, a young child that's between 5 and 10 loses it for 5 to 10 minutes. A teenager would lose it for a whole day maybe, or at least 12 hours. Grounding teenagers have family rules, such as if it's right, enjoy it. If it's wrong, don't do it. If you aren't sure, likely it's wrong. And you shouldn't be doing it. There's something inside that's telling you, you shouldn't be doing this. Oh, I'm just not sure. Yeah, you are. You just want to do it. Okay. If you're going to be later than you said, then find a phone and call home. Scolding can work, but not ongoing, berating them with sarcasm and ridicule or harshness. Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I were worried sick, is what Mary said to Jesus at the age of 12. Changes in discipline initially affect areas that include, for example, room upkeeping and belongings, obey home rules, treatment of siblings, study habits, grades. Later, these rules can include use of the car, curfew, activities, dating, money, allowance, homework, work around the house, their grades. Give increasing amounts of freedom as the teen matures and takes on greater responsibilities. They're learning they have to be prepared to go out on their own at some time. So you don't want them rigidly structured into a very tight time frame at home. So when they go out on their own, or worse yet, never leave home because of it, they don't know how to handle themselves. Increasing amounts of freedom as they mature and take on greater responsibility. So they're ready to go out on their own when the time is right. With curfew, money, driving, dating, and so forth, gradually increasing the guidelines. Information for this slideshow came from my own experience learning and growing with teens and young children, and a book called Parents and Teenagers, Practical Advice from Over 50 Christian Leaders. It was a huge book, so I went through it and took some of the nuggets and added some other information I had gotten from another ministry, as well as information I had learned, and put them together as best I could in an order that made some sense. This is Dr. Brandy Marks, licensed mental health counselor, Vancouver, Washington. And next week, we're going to be looking at managing manipulation. And the week after that, balancing the power. God bless.